right, it's on. Come on in, settle down, and yeah, or don't settle down. I don't care what you do. I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna talk about the astrology of this upcoming week. And you can listen, you can not listen, you can zone out, you can disassociate. Doesn't really matter to me. But I hope whatever you choose to do, it feels good. Yeah, my name is Joan Emerson Bell. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, licensed mental health counselor, and your weekly wizard. And I'm here to bring you all the astro weather that you may or may not need to help you navigate this week in space with a little style, with a little grace. Showing up every week at 11-ish a.m. Mountain Time, making that whatever time it is where you're at to tell you about the astro weather, all the transits that are happening, all the astro weather that is fit to print, to help you, I don't know, get a sense of the influences and energies that are playing upon us in the terrestrial sphere so that we can have a sense of, okay, what is being asked of me? How can I show up for this? Why is this thing arising at this moment? Why am I motivated to like do this thing or that thing? And like, how can I really work with this energy or this motivation or this drive or this desire in a skillful way so that I can have more of what I want and less of what I don't want? Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you, Bear. Nice to see you, Gina Maria. Hello, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Anything else? Oh, yeah. One of the reasons that I do this is because when I was just a little bitty baby astrologer, I tuned into people who were doing a similar thing on the internets. And it helped me to sort of understand the astrological language. It helped me to kind of understand how astrology functioned and the things that were happening in my life, as well as a context for what was unfolding in the larger world. And I talked to somebody recently who is like, they tuned in and they were like, we're like level one, and like kind of didn't understand anything that you were saying. And I think that like this is maybe level three. And I sat with that for a minute, and I think that's okay. And I apologize for anyone who feels like they're at a level one, and I think that's a great place to be. I try and make this accessible to people from all levels. And one of the ways that I try and do that is through storytelling, through mythology. So maybe it doesn't matter so much the like mechanics of the astrology, what a trine is, what this planet is, what a sign is, what a house is. Um, but perhaps through the storytelling, the mythology, some of the psychology that I bring in, what my hope is that we're able to feel, okay, this is what this energy feels like in my body, and this is how I can work with it and how I can show up for it. And so I just wanted to kind of preface by saying I'm sorry for anyone that this is over their head, and I'd like to make this as accessible as possible. And I only know how to do it the way that I know how to do it. But one of the things that happened for me on my journey is like I was like, I don't understand what these people are talking about at all, but I kept tuning in. And as I kept tuning in, it was sort of like a language immersion. And I was able to kind of pick up on some of the language, some of the lingo, some of the information. And I started to piece it together over time. And so, you don't have to tune into this if you don't want to. If this isn't your thing, that's all right. But I hope you find the thing that feels right for you. Because I don't know, like I'm a Sagittarius, I'm kind of an experiential learner. I like to jump into the pool at the deep end, all hooves in, right? And then just like figure out how to swim from there. And so I think that's the only way that I know how to share this is being like, okay, like here's all this stuff. This is how I see it. And so I hope that you can kind of like swim around with me in this Sagittarian deep end and start to pick up on these are the themes. Oh, I remember that planet from last time. Oh, like this planet made this ingress and now they're making this aspect and this thing is happening in my life, or I'm watching this unfold in the news, and like maybe how this is how that functions, or this is how I can work with that. And so I don't know. I just wanted to give that little preamble in case like people are feeling outside or like this is inaccessible. And you get to feel any way you want, and I'd like to make this as accessible to as many people as possible. And in that, maybe if you like it, share it with your friends or tell folks about it or like and subscribe and blah, 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 whatever, whatever everybody says to do. Or just do what feels good for you. I'm gonna do this either way, and I'm not really sure why, but like I'm kind of locked in and I really enjoy it because in doing this, it helps me to connect in with the astrology and helps me to have a better awareness of how I'm moving through the world. And one of the ways that I like to move through the world is to be of service. And I feel like this is a way that I can be of service, especially in these trying and turbulent times in this fraught world that we are so blessed to be able to live in at like what feels like, this turning point, this shifting moment in history, which can be really scary. And it can also be really exciting. And sometimes that line between anxiety and excitement is like paper thin, And so I would like, if I can, to in myself, I'm only speaking for me, is like move it more towards the excitement end of the spectrum, even though that anxiety is still alive of, oh, what am I going to do? How is this going to work? I don't understand. It's all falling apart. Maybe the falling apart is a part of that birthing pain of the new world seeking to be born. All of that being said, um, this is a year of a lot of change. All of the outer planets, including Saturn and Jupiter, are all changing sign this year. And we're beginning this week with Uranus changing sign, moving from Taurus into Gemini. Uranus spends about 7 or 8 years per sign. We also had Saturn changing sign, Neptune changing sign. Saturn spends 3 years approximately in a sign. Neptune spends like 14. At the end of 2024, we had Pluto leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius. Pluto is going to spend 20 years in Aquarius. Like these are big shifts, and like we're feeling it because the world is shifting in big ways, and the as above, so below, right? What happens in the celestial spheres, right? And in the external world also happens below in the terrestrial world and in the sort of internal world. But my friends, as the alchemical axiom goes, right? As above, so below, but so below as above. So the ways that we show up for what is unfolding in ourselves and in our lives and how we participate with the world is also impacting the ways that these planetary archetypes or energies or gods, however you want to think about them, how they function, right? How they interact with each other, how they interact with us. And one of the things that I love about astrology is it gives us an opportunity to be in relationship with these energies or archetypes or gods, right? To show up for what is being asked of us. And as we do that, I think it helps them to show up in better ways, right? It helps us to understand, okay, this is what's being asked of me, and so I will make the sacrifice, or I will show up in this way, or I will, muster some bravery and courage to participate in the world in a different, in a new way that like helps to shift some of the energy that I'm living in. And as we do this in our internal worlds and in our spheres of our relationships and our communities, as we listen to the call, I think that it also helps to lighten or shift the sort of big energies of these archetypes so that they can become a little lighter, so that they can function a little better, so that they can work with us and we can work with them instead of like struggling and fighting, or like the worst is being like, why is this happening to me? And being in that sort of victim role where we are just at the mercy of the winds of change and fate, right? And I believe that we have the opportunity in this realm to co-create our fate, right? It is maybe written in some way, right? But we also have the opportunity to show up for what is asked of us and participate in that and co-create that and work with it. So that is my preamble. I have one advertisement, and then we will get this party started right. I will be teaching a seven day workshop. I'll be co-facilitating a 7 day workshop in Epidavros, Greece, which is a place that is sacred to Asclepius, the god of healing, god of dreams. I'll be doing this September 20th through 27th with the author, mythologist, and brilliant dream worker Sarah Janes. And we will be talking about sacred waters, and we'll be doing field trips to some sacred sites, sacred springs, and talking about the mythology of these places, the gods and energies that are connected with them. A lot of them are sacred to Hera, so we'll be talking about Hera and Zeus and their relationship. We'll be talking about Jupiter in Cancer, which will be unfolding throughout this year. We'll be doing a lot of dream work, a lot of magic. I'll be talking about the water signs in the chart in astrology and how those function. We'll be talking about the element of water in magic. It's going to be beautiful. I hope you can join us. I think that there are like 2 spots left, and yeah, it would be really nice to see you there. If you can make it, if you want to come, that's September 20th through 27th. I don't know the website, but I will put it in the chat. There's a link in my bio, or not in the chat, but in the show notes on the YouTube and on the podcast. And there is a link in my bio if you want to check it out. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And I think, yeah, space is getting kind of limited. So if you want to go check it out, hit it up. Anywho, let's get into the astrology of the week. This week in space. We're looking at the week of July the 7th, which is today, 2025, through July the 13th, 2025. So this is both a light week because there ain't much going on, and also a pretty big week because the few things that are going on are pretty dang big. So hold on to your butts, my friends. Starting it all off today, Monday, July the 7th, we have Uranus, the planet of liberation, freedom, revolution, authenticity, radical change, breakdown, breakthrough, technological innovation, entering into the mutable air sign of Gemini. Gemini happening to be ruled by Mercury. And just a heads up, I'm gonna spend a long time on this. We got a couple other things going on in the week, but like the bulk of it, we'll be talking about Uranus entering Gemini, and I'm going to be talking about a myth that is associated with Uranus, and we'll see where that goes. Just some heads up on the dates. Uranus enters Gemini on July 7th. They retrograde back into Taurus on November the 7th. They will re-enter Gemini to stay from the 26th or 27th of April 2026. They will stay there until August of 2032, when they will ingress into Cancer, and then come back into Gemini in December of 32 and re-enter Cancer on, I believe, May 21st or 2nd of 2033. So it's going to be a minute. And yeah, they've been in Taurus since 2018. And so, we can think about Uranus through Taurus as the seismic shifts that we have experienced through since 2018, right? COVID, the rise of AI, Trump's second administration. Again, Uranus is this planet of radical change and the breakdown of what has been traditional structures, these Saturnian structures. Uranus is the first planet outside of Saturn, right? And Saturn was previously the limit. It was the structure. It was like, this is how we do things. And then Uranus is like, nah, man, we can do things in a different way. Bam, bam, bam. Kind of blows things up and breaks things down. And as Uranus was moving through Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign, which is really like holding on to our value system, right? It's creating these earthquakes and seismic shifts and disruptions in the value system, right? And what keeps us comfortable, what makes us stable, right? And I've been experiencing that. I think that is maybe a collective thing that we've been experiencing. And now they're going to move into this mutable air sign of Gemini, who happens to be ruled by Mercury. So this year we are seeing all of these outer planets, as well as Jupiter and Saturn, changing signs, right? And this is a pretty big deal. Pluto entered into Aquarius for their extended 20-year residency in the sign of the water bearer at the end of 2024. Neptune ingressed into Aries just a little while ago, followed shortly after by Saturn, right? And they are moving towards their conjunction. We'll get to that a little later in today's program. Jupiter entered Cancer a few weeks ago, and now today, or late last night, Uranus is entering the sign of Gemini. So this is a year of big shifts, right? A lot of things moving, a lot of things happening. These planets, these big energies, these slow-moving energies, changing sign, changing residency, changing scene, right? And this creates internal shifts. This creates external shifts. This changes the world that we live in. It changes the scenes in the world that we live in, right? And change can be really scary and it can be really destabilizing. Even if the changes that we are entering into can lead to better things ultimately than the places that we are in, us humans are kind of hardwired for safety, and part of safety is connected to what we know and what is familiar. And so when we are offered the opportunity to change and the invitation to step into the unknown, it can bring up a lot of fear. Right? And we often will choose the suffering that we are familiar with over the fear of the unknown, even if that leap into the beyond can provide us more ease and space over time. But we tend to choose the suffering we know versus the possibility of something that we don't know, even if it can be better. Right? Uranus is a planet associated with freedom, liberation, and revolution. It pushes things to a breaking point in order to facilitate a breakthrough. Last week, we talked about the myth of Prometheus, right? The Titan, and according to mythology, the one who created humanity and brought us fire, right? And so, in the story of Prometheus, right, they trick Zeus into accepting the worst parts of the animal sacrifice for the gods to eat so that humans could get the best part of the meat. Prometheus is like really on team human, right? And as the story goes, in the beginning, a long, long time ago, in a land far, far away, Prometheus, a Titan god who was spared from being sent to Tartarus after the Titanomachy, the battle between Zeus and Kronos for rule of our realm, right? Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus supported the Olympians, Zeus and his crew, right, in this war against the Titans, and they were spared from the fate of being sent to Tartarus, the lowest level of hell. And so they're hanging out, they're chilling, right? And in the beginning, Prometheus forms us human beings, out of clay, right? He uses the water of life, right? And breathes life into us using his divine breath. His twin brother, Epimetheus, right, was assigned with the task of giving all the creatures of the earth their various qualities, such as swiftness and cunning and strength and fur and wings, all the things that make all the sentient beings in this world really cool. And unfortunately, by the time Epimetheus got to us, he was all out of stuff to hand out. And so humans didn't have a lot, right? We don't have great hearing, we don't have great vision, we're not very fast, right? We don't have claws, we don't have a lot of strength, we don't have fur, we need clothes, we need all of these things, right? But Prometheus loved us, right? And decided to make humans stand upright, just like the Olympians did, and to give them fire, to give us fire. Zeus was not really happy with this idea, right? He did not like the idea that humans were starting to look a lot like the Olympians. He didn't like that we were starting to act like them. And so he decreed that humans had to sacrifice a portion of their food to the gods in order to show us our place and to keep us humble. So Prometheus, my man, right, who's on Team Human, being our creator and all, wants us to get fed. And so he makes two portions from the first sacrifice. Right? He creates one pile with the animal bones wrapped in juicy fat. puts it in a bowl, and another portion with the finest meat from the animal hidden inside of the animal's hide and puts that in another bowl. And then he gives these bowls to Zeus and he's like, okay, choose one. Right. Zeus is like, yo, I want this like juicy fat wrapped thing. Like that looks delicious. And ends up getting the bones, right? But he had given his word, and so he was forced to accept the bones as the share of the Olympian sacrifice. And this is how all sacrifices were made after that. The portion that was given to the god was the burnt bones of the animal, while us humans got to eat the tasty meat. Zeus was not really pleased with this trickery and decreed that humans would be denied fire from that moment forth. And they would have to eat all of that good meat cold. Right? There also might be this subtext of this myth where humans had all of these elements, the elements of the world, earth, fire, or earth, water, air, in our construction, the clay of earth, the water of life, the divine breath, right? And we already walked on two legs, right? Just like the Olympians. And I think Zeus was a little afraid that if we got the power of fire, we would become too powerful and would overthrow him, just like he overthrew Kronos, just like Kronos overthrew Uranus. And so he wanted to deny us fire. Prometheus wasn't having this, right? He wanted to see his creations live up to their full potential. And so he stole solar fire from the gods and brought it down to earth in a fennel stalk so that his creations, us, could live could live into our destiny and achieve the beautiful vision that he had seen for us. Side note, this is important, that Prometheus is also the god of foresight who can see into the future and the potential in all things. Right? When we can see potential, there's a desire to do what we need to do to achieve that ideal, right? And so, because Prometheus tricked Zeus and he wasn't having it and stole his fire, Zeus punished Prometheus by chaining him to a rock, where Zeus's eagle would fly down each day and eat out Prometheus's liver. Right? But because Prometheus was immortal, he would never die, and his liver would grow back each day. Right? And I want to just like pause here for a moment and talk about this scene. When it's grisly and it's gruesome, right? But the liver processes our toxins, right? And one of the ways that I think about this kind of like uh punishment of Prometheus, right, is this eagle, this thing that like sees everything, kind of swooping down and like eating this part of us that like keeps us clean, that keeps our blood clean, that processes emotions, that processes toxins in our body. And one of the things that we may notice as Uranus, right, who is associated with Prometheus, um, or has an association with Prometheus. Right? One of the things that we may notice is Uranus moves into this Mercury ruled sign of Gemini, which is all about breaking things down and separating things out and communication and taking in information, right? One of the things that I have found, maybe this is just me, that like when I'm taking in tons of information and I'm really in my head spins out, right? And it begins to pick at me, right? And it begins to pick at things, right? And I can think about, the sort of information overload created by Uranus and Gemini as this like eagle that is looking for like a big picture kind of coming down and like eating this part of me that like keeps me clean, that deals with my emotions, that deals with the toxicity in my system, and like picking at it and picking at it and picking at it, which sounds like pretty gnarly, right? And so this is something that maybe we can watch out for, or just be aware of, that desire to pick at things. And again, Gemini is like breaking everything apart, right, to like figure out how it really works and how it functions. And Uranus is like sudden like breakdown, breakthrough, like run into the house, throw everything around, right? Looking for the thing that I'm looking for. And this can be a way of like picking at ourselves, right? Or picking at other people, or picking at systems, or picking at situations, which may be beneficial over the long run, but like just be aware if we are like picking at this place that creates a lot of toxicity that prevents us from processing the toxicity that we are taking in, or the toxicity of the information that we are receiving. And Gina Maria asks, is it an eagle or a vulture? I've heard it both ways, but I kind of like it being the eagle of Zeus, or that's how I wanted to tell it today, because I think the eagle has this like great long vision and then will like swoop down and like hit its goal, right? And I think that this is really beautiful. However, again, we want to like make sure that that vision is in line with our vision, right? The thing that we are looking for is not something that like continues to like inflict wounds on us. We don't want to pick at our wounds. We want to pick at the things that are bringing us closer to what we want, right? Unless like what you want is to pick at your wounds for the next 7 years. And you can do that. It's up to you, right? But maybe we want to pick at like the threads that pull us towards the world that we want to live in, or the life that we want to have. Again, Prometheus, this god of forethought and this god of the ideal, right? Oh, this is like, I see the potential in this thing and I want to help it live into its potential. So how do we like, keep our eye on that prize instead of picking at the places where this isn't good enough or this isn't working? Because one of the things that Uranus will do will be like, this isn't the ideal, I'm blowing it up, right? Which can be very beneficial if we find ourselves living in stagnant situations, right? If we are have made choices that have put us in places that we are not in line with our authenticity, right? But Uranus will also like pick at things and be like, I don't know, I just need to blow this up, I'm bored, right? Or this isn't good enough, right? Or it could be better. And we like blow up systems that are actually like not broken, right? And there are a lot of broken systems in the world, right? There's a lot of stuff in me that needs to change, right? And then there's some things that are like actually kind of functional and working, right? And I think this is a good time to choose our battles, right? To really choose what to pick at and what to change and what to put our vital energy towards, instead of being bored or frustrated and just blowing things up because we need something to do, or being like, I'm into changing everything, so I'm going to change this thing that works, right? I'm changing all this stuff. I'm going to change my spark plugs, even though I don't know how, right? And so, anyway, coming back to the myth, right? Zeus then punishes humanity for, receiving fire, right? For disobeying the Olympians, for getting a little too close to the divine. And he does this by creating a creature of stunning beauty who he endowed with an insatiable curiosity. And her name was Pandora. And the gods entrusted Pandora with a jar, or a box, inside of which the gods had placed all of the horrors and nightmares that they could gather. Anger, wrath, resentment, fear, craving, jealousy, the TV show Friends, doubt, capitalism, greed, racism, negative self-talk, etc. And at the bottom, Hermes, Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, placed hope. And then they sealed this jar up tight. They gave it to Pandora. And they're like, here you go. Just hang on to this. And under no circumstances ever, ever open it. Okay, good luck. And then they sent her off to Epimetheus, right? Prometheus's twin brother, who had decided to come live among us because we're pretty rad, right? Instantly, Epimetheus was dumbfounded and love struck by Pandora's beauty. And now Prometheus had warned Epimetheus, I know some shit is about to go down because I like just did a thing, right? And like under no circumstances should you accept any gifts from Zeus, because like it's probably not a gift, all right? But Pandora was so hot, and that Epimetheus was like, but like, what could possibly go wrong with this, right? And so instead of sending her away, Epimetheus decided to marry her. And now there's another interesting side note here. Prometheus is the god of forethought or foresight, who can see the consequences of all actions and is always kind of playing four-dimensional chess, right? Trying to reach the ideal. His twin brother, Epimetheus, is the god of hindsight, who can only see the repercussions of actions after they have occurred, right? It's an interesting situation there, right? It's kind of like Epimetheus is walking backwards and can only see the past and what is unfolded, behind. Right. While Prometheus is walking forward and seeing how events might take shape in the future based on the choices made in the present. Anyway, one day, Pandora's intense curiosity got the better of her, as it does, and she decided to open this forbidden jar just a little bit, just enough to take a peek because, what's inside? I gotta know. I gotta find out. I mean, what could it hurt to just crack the lid a little bit and scope it out? So when she opened this jar, she released all of the evils and uncomfortable thoughts and fears upon the earth. Only one thing was left in the jar when Pandora managed to close the lid again, and that was hope, what Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, had placed in the jar. And now we are here, living in all the man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, and paying taxes and scrolling Instagram, right? And this is our world, for better or for worse, right? So why am I telling this story? Right? And I think that there are a number of bits to this tale that give us a better understanding of Uranus. And they can help us to understand how this planet of revolution and idealism might function in the Mercury ruled sign of Gemini. Um, you know, One of the things that I want to bring in, right, is that Gemini, ruled by Mercury, right? Mercury, kind of a trickster, Uranus or Prometheus, kind of a trickster. So there is like this trickster element that is developing here, right? Prometheus, like tricking Zeus into giving us the good portions of the meat using cunning and cleverness and trickery, and also his gift of forethought, right? How is this going to play out? This is that four-dimensional chess, right? Mercury also a total trickster. And so as Uranus moves into Gemini, there is like a lot of like trickery, sleight of hand, magic that we might be finding. Uranus is sort of like a lightning bolt that like illuminates things in a sudden flash and an inspiration, right? This may be a trick of the eye or sleight of hand, right? And also, maybe there are ways that we can tap into that sort of trickery, right? The ability to tell the truth through, humor or trickery or sleight of hand that can be very beneficial, right? That can help illuminate what needs to be said, what needs to be revealed. And so I just wanted to bring that in first, right? Another thing is thinking about Uranus's relationship to Prometheus gives us that kind of radical quality that is not satisfied with the status quo. I think this is how Uranus really functions. Right? It's not okay. It's not willing to settle with how things are or how the existing order functions. Right? Prometheus wants to see his creations live up to their full potential, which I'm really grateful for because I like I, I like striving towards full potential, and I don't really want to be stuck eating raw meat. And Prometheus will do this no matter what the consequences for him or for us might be. And this is pretty dang radical. And I think this is also a way that Uranus functions is like, I need to see this thing through, and I don't really care what happens. I don't care what happens to the people around me. I don't care what happens to me, right? I need to like get this done. And this is like how the atom bomb was created, right? And I think how 4chan was created. And like, that can be really toxic, being like, I need to make this work and I don't care what the consequences are because I have this vision and I need to see it through. And again, that can also be really skillful, but like these are the places that we need to be aware of. Gemini, right, the twins has these two poles, which in this context, we can consider as the like skillful and unskillful, or like I need to move fast and break things just to see what happens, and like let me consider the consequences of my actions. And I think that this is where Prometheus and Epimetheus come in, right? Uranus can only see, okay, this is what I need to do, but Epimetheus is like, okay, well, these are like some fucked up consequences, bro, right? Like, oh, maybe I should have done it this other way, or like maybe I shouldn't have moved so fast and broke things because like now things are broken and they're really hard to repair, right? So Josh Schrei, who has the Emerald podcast, which I really like, and I recommend checking out his work. He did this podcast on fire and said something that I always think about in relationship to Uranus and Prometheus, right? And when way back when, the dawn of time, right? When humans received or discovered fire, right? And we began to cook our food, it created this massive physiological shift in us. Before we got fire, we had a really big, robust gut and a very thick skull, which allowed us to digest the raw food that we foraged for, right? And I imagine that the thick skull was so that when we were bumping into things in the dark, right, we had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, like, and we bumped into the cave because we couldn't see because we didn't have fire, like it didn't, split our heads open, right? But when we got fire and began to cook our food, we no longer needed such a developed or overdeveloped gut. And we could now see in the dark, so we weren't like stumbling over things and like bashing our cranium into stuff, right? And now that we didn't need to spend so much of our energy digesting raw food, right? That energy became freed up to move into our brains. And our gut shrank and our brains began to grow, right? And our skull softened a little bit to accommodate that brain growth. So humans discovered fire, right? This discovery or receiving of fire is in direct relationship to the development of our thinking capacity, right? And the development of the frontal cortex, which allows us to weigh our options and consider our outcomes. It is the Promethean thing, right? Which is like, if I do this, this will probably happen, right? Which is very different than running on instinct. And this allows us to develop society and culture and philosophy and poetry and spirituality, all these great human attributes, right? And this revolutionary shift is what Uranus is all about. This is what Prometheus was talking about when he was like, I can see the potential that my creations hold, and I want them to be able to achieve that. And, through receiving fire, we were able to do all of these things, right? Develop math and higher math and quantum physics. And be able to participate in the creation of inventions, which brings us the electrode and the cathode tube and the television and the radio and the internet, right? These are all like fire things, right? Our screens are like mimic flickering fire, and that's part of the hypnotic quality of them, right? And so Uranus and Gita Marie is saying it's easier to digest raw food than cooked food. I have no idea. I just know like the evolution of the human gut biome and brain as told by Josh Schrei on the fire episode of the Emerald podcast, but it kind of it makes sense, and so Uranus isn't satisfied with how things are, right? Prometheus isn't satisfied with like the order, it sees the potential for how things could be or should be, and it strives to achieve that ideal. Uranus is the first planet beyond Saturn. It breaks the paradigm of the old system, the old limitations, and the traditional way that things were done. Prior to Uranus's discovery in 1781, which was during the French Revolution, by the by, Saturn was the limit of the planetary spheres. It was the limit of what we could see with the naked eye, right? Uranus was discovered using new technology, the telescope, and it broke down the limitations of what was possible and really shifted our awareness of the structure of the cosmos. And through that, again, as above, so below, right? And as above, it shifted our awareness of what was possible in the terrestrial realms. And Uranus breaks from the past and strives towards the new, always seeking to bring things towards this ideal. And last week I talked about the Greek or origin myth of Kronos, Saturn, and Uranus. So, if you want to go deeper into that myth, I highly suggest you checking that out. And I'm not really going to dwell on it here, but just to summarize, Uranus is a sky god, right, who is dethroned by Kronos, Saturn, who is an earth god, a terrestrial god. And this is the constant and eternal struggle, right? The ideal vision, which is contained in the sky realm of thoughts and ideas, versus the earth, the actual physical reality of what is possible given the constraints of reality, right? Uranus says, I'm gonna blow it up and create something new and different that can be more in line with the idea of how things should or could be. And this is great, right? However, when Uranus becomes active, they can seek to blow up things that are actually working and are not a problem because they feel constrained or stagnant or bored or whatever. They just get on that like I'm gonna blow it up kick. Right? So as Uranus shifts signs and gets this new breath of life in Gemini, I recommend practicing discernment and really checking in about what needs to change. And there's a bunch of shit that needs to change, in my opinion, right? But, thinking about uh, what needs to change first, right? And what is the best place to direct our energy. And it's sometimes really easy to be like, the problem is out there, right? Because there are a lot of fucking problems out there. And in doing that, we also might be like, I don't need to like worry about me because I'm gonna fix this problem or help that person or save this person or fix that person or like change this thing. And we kind of abandon ourselves and our own inner work in favor of like fixing the outside, thinking that's gonna fix us, right? Or changing our circumstances, thinking that that's gonna change our internal worlds. And so just consider this, right? Consider this and consider where you want to put your energy and what might need to change first in order to facilitate the larger changes that are in line with the ideal, right? And don't just upend the table on everything because you can or because you feel bored. Choose wisely when you want to direct that vital energy of change towards, so you're not tearing down things that are actually functioning and that you'll miss when they're gone, right? And this brings up this relationship between the twin brothers, Epimetheus and Prometheus, forethought and hindsight, right? And ideally, we want a good balance of both. If we are pulled too far in the direction of Prometheus, then we only care about what's going to happen next, right? And it makes it really difficult to be present in the moment when we're always like, but what's next? But what's next? Or I can do this better, or that could be better, or that could be better, right? It really pulls us out of the present moment. And in its most unskillful manifestation, we stop caring about the impact that our actions have on those around us. Right? And this can be a real problem with Uranus. It can make choices that have pretty negative impacts on the present in service of the future vision. And we see this in politics all the time, right? The story of like, oh, if we let these people starve or let them die, then we will be able to build a better, more utopian society in the future. And I don't think that's a great way of functioning. But if we are pulled too far towards Epimetheus, then we lose sight of the future, right? And our goals, and we get lost in nostalgia or regrets or the mistakes that we have made along the path. Right? And they say that hindsight is 2020 vision, which can be helpful, but only if we are able to see what we did and what went wrong, right? And not have it create negative self-talk and a nagging sense that we could have done better, or like the story that if I had only done this, then things would have been different, right? I don't know if that's very helpful. It's important to learn from the things that we have done and our mistakes, but if we get lost in this sort of negative self-talk loop, right? That's like Uranus's Zeus's eagle picking at Prometheus's liver over and over again, when we're like, oh, I messed this up and I messed that up, right? And that's that like picking and toxicity, right? And Epimetheus can keep us locked in this longing for the past, right? If that's all that we are able to see. Oh, it was so much better then. Oh, I had, more opportunity then. Oh, I've wasted my life, right? And if we are only able to see the past, then it's really hard to stay present with what's happening in the now. You see what's happening here? These two brothers, these twins, right? As they separate into foresight and hindsight, right? What gets lost is the past, is the present, right? The present moment. And ideally, we are kind of integrating, okay, I did this and this informs the future and what I can do in the future. But the present is the only place that we have any power with which to act, right? So if we're living in the future potential or we are living in the past, right, then we lose all power in the present. And I think that this is a very Gemini thing, right? Because Gemini is the twins, these two poles, right? And in this context, we can think about, hindsight and foresight, right? But what does that do to our present moment reality? And Gemini, at its core, in my opinion, right, is being able to hold both of these, the hindsight and the foresight, the two twins, right, these two poles of our being, and be able to find that space in the middle where we integrate that and can stay really present so that we do have the ability and the power to act and influence the world, right? And again, this relationship between these two Titan brothers is really important, really on brand right now because Uranus is moving into Gemini, the sign of the twins, right? The shift between the two poles, the back and forth between the binary of twin one and twin two. Gemini represents this polarity that is created by the introduction of the other, right? And the duality of life. And we live in a world of duality, my friends, right? Day and night, life and death, black and white, right? But all life exists in the 50 shades of gray between these two spaces of absolute, between these two brothers, life and death or foresight and hindsight. Right? But the absolutes are pretty necessary, right? Gemini reminds us of this duality and the journey between the poles of absolutes. And I think Gemini will just like go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And again, I think it's about like learning to find that place in the center where we can integrate the wisdom of each of these poles without getting pulled too far in one direction or the other, or needing to spend all our time racing back and forth. You know, And I think that there's this interesting dance or relationship between the viewpoints that are created by this relationship of the self and the other, right? Because I can have all of the ideas that I want, right? In my mind, it's like whatever, they're just spinning around in there. But it's when I meet somebody else and begin to communicate it that I get feedback from the other person who's like, well, have you thought about this? Could you try it this way? Right? How does that feel in your body? Hmm. Yeah, and Kendra Deluxe is saying the West generally views time as a river flowing towards us, foresight events coming towards us. Japanese culture views time as a river flowing away from us, receding, right? Which I really like. And I believe in Arabic culture, right? There's this sense, like I was saying earlier, right? In the West, we always think about like we're walking into the future. And in Arabic culture, they're like, no, you're not. That's stupid. Right? You have no idea what you're walking backwards because all you can see is the past, right? And you have no idea what's coming up in the future until it recedes into the past, until that epimethean moment, right? Again, maybe like what is it like to have a river that flows both ways? Get you one that can do both. You know what I'm saying? And so, in this another sort of element of this, and this is Uranus and Saturn, right? That's like ideal and the physical reality, the ordering principles of Kronos or Saturn, right? The forces of order and chaos, the status quo and radical change, the past and the present. How do we learn to hold both of these poles in ourselves and in our relationship so we don't get pulled into the extreme of either one of the twins? Right? The idea of the dark twin and the light twin, right? And this comes from Castor and Pollux, which is the Gemini myth, right? The divine twin and the mortal twin, right? And this is a tale as old as time, right? And these both live within us, striving for the possibility and the potential and the realization of the limitation of a lifespan and the very real eventuality of our death, right? And our mortality. Right? Uranus creates situations that can break down the separation between these poles so that we can learn to hold and integrate both of them. This may come through radical new forms of communication or technology or discovery, or the ways that we were able to process and communicate information, right? I think it can help us integrate these sort of poles of the past and the future, right? And also, ideally, help us to come more into the present instead of like disassociating into our black boxes, right? Fun fact, the printing press was invented in 1440 when Uranus was in Gemini. Right. This revolutionized the way information was spread and accessed, right? It was a total revolution because it provided books and knowledge and information to individual people and not just the monarchy and the priest class, right? And it became a democratization of information, which also, created a lot of struggle and strife as everybody then got a Bible later on when the Gutenberg Bible was printed and everybody was like, wait, like this is how, like, but I see God this way. And then it created warring factions. And I think this is a thing that happens when humans get new technology, when we get new toys. We get like really kind of into I am right and you were wrong, right? We go back into that polarity. We get this opportunity to be in the present, and then we get thrown back into the polarity. Right. So, during Uranus's time in Gemini in 1941 through 1948, right? This is sort of during and right after World War II, television really came into prominence, and, everybody had a TV in their home, and it, spread information visually in that way. So, with Uranus and Gemini, we may expect new technological innovations that really revolutionize the way that we share and spread information. This might look like AI or quantum computing, right? Revolutions in the internet or social media, or some new emergent technology that rapidly innovates the way we receive and share information. And one other component of the myth that I just wanted to touch on real quick is the Pandora aspect, right? The jar of man-made horrors that she opens out of curiosity and unleashes upon the world. Oopsie, right? And humans have this deep curiosity to like poke and prod and innovate and invent, which I think is really beautiful. But sometimes we don't really consider the like Saturnian or Epimethean consequences of our actions, right? Or the long-term impact that these actions might have on our world, right? And when we're in that Uranian realm of innovation and invention, it's really hard to be like, what is this actually going to do? Let me think like 200 years in the future and like see what this might do, right? And we saw this with the internet and social media and how it led to information and like kind of some severe mental health issues in the youth, right? And I think in all of us, and the boomers especially, right, who have like a hard time discerning fact from fiction in Facebook posts because, there's no training for that, right? They didn't grow up in that world, right? Where like there's a little bit more training around like how do I discern information, but like all of a sudden you're blasted with all of this information and pictures, which like for a long time a picture equaled reality, and now there's this overwhelming spread of like doctored and AI pictures that are kind of overwhelming to systems that have not been trained for fucking decades on how to process that, right? And the rise of the social media influencer, I think, is connected with Uranus's time in Aries from 2011 to 2018, right? Where everybody like becomes a star and it's like me, right? A revolution in like me-ness, right? And individualness. And this is a product of that where I'm just like sitting here telling you my ideas, right? And look at me, right? I've got all these like unique and innovative ideas. Check this out, right? That's, I think, Uranus through Aries. And now we have AI, which could be a total Pandora's box that we are just beginning to open, right? And then like integrate into like all of our systems, right? And just like the myth, it was written, right? And we're living it out, right? And this is maybe part of our destiny. We're playing out the story. However, I think it's really important to remember that at the bottom of this jar, right, Mercury, who rules over Gemini, placed hope, which I think is a really vital component to this story. Right? And as we're moving through these drastic shifts and information overloads, just see if you can find the places where you can access hope. even for extra credit, if you so choose, where you can cultivate and share that hope with others. Because hope for a better future is the orientation point that will help us navigate whatever is released from Pandora's box, this current and emerging moment. And I think that hope for the better future is also that orientation point that we can point our compass towards, right? About being like, this is the ideal that I'm trying to create, right? As we are tearing down old structures, it's really important to keep the ideal of what we can make and what it could look like and having hope for that better future. Okay. Running a little behind today. Apologize, but let's see if I can get through the last couple of things and let you all go on the way. Oh, and Gina Marie is saying that sort of the discerning of information just requires using your brain to see the difference, and that her generation should have learned more from their kids. Yo, and that is real, right? And this is the history of Greek mythology is like, the youth overthrowing the old generation and a lot of fear and suppression of the youth because the older generation be it Uranus, Kronos, or Zeus, right, trying to like suppress new energy coming up, and instead of learning from that new energy and integrating it, it is trying to suppress it so it's not dethroned or overthrown. So also today, Monday, July the 7th, we have Venus in Gemini, trine Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. This is going down at 3 degrees of the air signs of Gemini and Aquarius. And so this is a supportive aspect between Venus, a planet that deals with love and relationship, as well as creativity, aesthetics, beauty, and values. Pluto is a planet of initiation. It deals with death and rebirth and transformation. When they come together in a harmonious aspect, it's like kind of sexy. But I'm also a Scorpio rising, so like maybe I'm into that, right? So Pluto is also a planet that is connected with power, specifically the sort of chthonic power of the underworld. Venus has just moved into the mutable air sign of Gemini. So here they are working out their values in relationship with others, right? And this is a sign of duality. And here again, we meet the other and communicate our desires and relational needs, which is great, right? And we receive feedback from those that we are in relationship with. This helps us to evolve our sense of love and a sense of our needs, a sense of our aesthetics, what we find beautiful, and as well as our value system. Right? And it's through this feedback from others and the reflections that we receive from those we are in relationship with that we are able to deepen our capacity to understand what we really value and how we can love ourselves. And through this new understanding, we are able to love others and share our love based on what we're discovering about what works and what doesn't. Sounds great. Ideally, this helps us to better tune in with ourselves, right, and our own needs and our own core values without going into people pleasing or self abandonment. And if we do, we are pulled from the pole of the self towards the pole of the other. And then that can just provide us with valuable information about what actually works and what is not quite right for us or what pulls us out of our alignment, right? Because we know when we're out of our alignment. Sometimes it takes a little while, but in those places where I found myself out of alignment, I'm like, wait a second, hold up. Like this does not feel right. So I think that coming into relationship with others, like gives us an opportunity to be like, oh, this is what it feels like when I'm right sized, when I'm in my right alignment. And this is what it feels like when I'm kind of pulled out of that. And like that doesn't mean that I have to snap back to that alignment and be like, no, right? But we can integrate that without, being like, oh my God, I need to like totally abandon myself and do all these things for you. So, with Pluto up in the mix, it helps us to access power and the transformational quality of love and relationship. This transit can increase emotional intensity, and it can make our connections in this as we come into this week feel pretty intense. Connections might create the space for us to transform. However, this process often requires sacrifice. Old values and ideas about love may need to be released or laid to rest in order to create the space for something new to emerge and or a new dimension of ourselves to be born. And that that can engage in relationship in a new and hopefully more empowering way. Pluto deals with the unconscious, those survival patterns that live in our somatic system below the awareness of conscious thought. So Sigmund Freud conceptualized the unconscious as a topographical model. And I know this because I'm studying for the National Counselor exam. Right. This topographical model, which is represented by an iceberg, right? So if you picture an iceberg, right, and there's the level of the ocean, and then the iceberg gets real big under the surface. And above the surface of the water, just the tip, right, of the iceberg, is our conscious thought and everything that we are consciously aware of. Under the water, just below the surface, is our preconscious mind, which contains our memories and stored knowledge. And the majority of the iceberg is like deep below the surface in the freezing dark water. And this is the unconscious mind, which contains our fears, our survival instincts, and our motivations. This, my friends, is the realm of Pluto, laying deep below the surface, right? And driving us to stay alive. This layer of the unconscious contains the deep, unspoken desires that motivate us from the land of the underworld that lives beyond our awareness or below our awareness. As Venus comes into a supportive relationship with this unseen layer of the iceberg, we can gain access to some of this unconscious material through the container of relationship. Or there's an opportunity to tune into it through creative practice or process or aesthetic experience, because Pluto deals with all this raw, unprocessed, unconscious material. It can be a tad obsessive, right? Just something to be aware of this week, right? However, this transit gives us a chance to touch into the depths through coming into connection with others. Again, Venus is now in Gemini, which gives us a chance to have our fears and desires, right, that have long been held beneath the surface, right? It gives us an opportunity to kind of emerge and be met through, connection and communication with other people. The supportive relationship between Venus and Pluto today can allow for us to process some of this deep emotional and psychological material with the people we are in relationship with or longing for, which can produce some profound insight about about our own inner workings. However, one of the way that Pluto tends to function is through projection, right? All the things that we disown about ourselves, that we are afraid of or feel shame around, can easily become outsourced or projected out onto other people, right? And this can look like stories that this person will save me, or fears of rejection that we project out onto those we are in relationship with, or it may look like past relational wounds from our family system or past relationships that we project onto others. Oh, you're going to do this to me. You're going to do this to me. I can't let that happen. Right? Or the desires or longings that produce feelings of shame that have been suppressed, which may begin to emerge under this transit, which then, of course, which then may cause us to reject these desires and blame others for our inability to access or live out these psychological or physiological needs. If this happens, and it may or may not happen for you, this is an opportunity to stop, collaborate, and listen, right? To pay attention to these trailheads, right? Where we feel a rising obsession or deep longing or the urge to outsource our desires and fears onto someone or something else, right? These places give us a chance to know ourselves better. And with this harmonious contact between Venus and Pluto, ideally we can work these feelings out in healthy and safe ways through the container of relationship. And this can be intimate or sexual relationships, or it can be through safe friendships or therapeutic relationships, or even like relationships with nature or pets, etc. We can also process this deep psychological material through artistic or creative practice, right? Or through the experience of connecting with beauty and aesthetic experiences. You may see art or performances that help you to access these deep and hidden Plutonian places, which then may provide the vehicle for you to process what arises through conversation, writing, or other forms of communication, which Venus and Gemini really loves. Either way, this is a day where there can be breakthroughs and new awarenesses that have been building up over quite a while, but over the weekend, especially since Venus and Uranus were conjunct on July 4th, which can now touch into deep layers of the psyche, which can then be processed through connection and relationship and creativity. And just try and maintain an awareness of what is arising within you and see if you can find healthy ways of processing and communicating what is coming up, even if you're not sure that it is totally fully formed yet. Yes, too legit to quit, Jesse Brown, and stop, collaborate, and listen, my friends. Okay. Whew, little behind schedule, but like we're just going to roll with it. So Thursday, July the 10th, we have a full moon in Capricorn. This is going down at 18 degrees and 50 arc minutes of the sign of the goatfish, which means that the sun is at that same degree over there in the watery sign of Cancer. This occurs at 1:36 in the PM Pacific time, making that 4:36 in the PM Eastern time. So full moons are these culminating moments of the seeds that were planted during a new moon. This and this sort of reveals the work and growth or experience of life that begins to ripen and show itself in the felt sense and in the emotional world with the full moon. So this full moon in Capricorn is the development of a process that was begun at the Cancer new moon, which occurred back on June 25th. All right. So if you'd like, you can think back to what was going on during that time, what emerged, what felt most potent, right? During that new moon, Jupiter in Cancer was conjoined the new moon, which provided the opportunity to expand our emotional capacity, right? Now that the moon is ripening in the opposing sign of Capricorn, we get to consider what structures we were able to create in order to facilitate that sense of emotional expansion. As the moon comes to fullness, we get a chance to see what might need to shift in order to continue to access and achieve and better support this new pattern of expansion and emotional connection. Cancer deals with emotional security. It's about developing the structures which allow us to feel safe enough to come into connection. Capricorn says, once we have our physical and survival needs met, then we can concern ourselves with our emotional needs. However, Cancer, a sign that occurs at the height of summer, right, says, I don't need to worry about all that, right? I can sleep outside. The weather's beautiful. I can eat the berries and fruits that are ripening on the vine, right? I want connection. I want community. I want care. I want to feel cared for, right? So at this full moon, we are looking at these structures that Capricorn is able to create in order to facilitate that sense of care and emotional connection. Capricorn, right, is kind of seeking achievement, is the sea goat that looks for a mountain and climbs it. So the question that we can ask ourselves with this lunation is, what are we trying to achieve here, my friends? What is the mountain that we have been inspired to climb? And how does that relate to what we care about? And more importantly, how those things care for us. Right? Capricorn can kind of get caught up in the need to achieve or to climb just for the sake of climbing. Right? We need to remember to tune into that fishtail of the sea goat, which often gets forgotten. This is the part of Capricorn that lives in the sensitive waters of the emotional world, right? And in our intuition and in our dream worlds. And with this lunation, we can think back to the intentions and needs that surface during that watery Cancer new moon, which gives us this valuable information about the emotional needs and desires for connection and care that have been motivating our actions and desires over the past few weeks. With this full moon, we get a moment of awareness where we can adjust some of these things. We can consider what we are climbing and why. We can tune into the needs or wants that have been motivating us and really consider what can help us to experience more connection and care. And what might we need to adjust so we have more access to the nourishment that we are seeking? What structures might we need to enact to develop that can help us to nurture our goals? Right? What systems might you need to implement to provide more access to that nourishment that will allow you to help feed the things and people and places in your life that you really care about? This full moon in Capricorn is trine Mars in Virgo. Mars is at 13 degrees of Virgo. Mars is a planet of will and conflict and action. Mars asks us what we care enough about that we're willing to fight for it. When the full moon in Capricorn sees the mountain, like where the full moon in Capricorn sees the mountain and wants to climb it, Mars in Virgo provides the motivation and the will to engage in that struggle. But Mars in Virgo is also like, hey, do we have enough snacks for everybody? Does everybody have water before we get up this mountain, right? Does anyone need to go to the bathroom before we start this ascent, right? And they like look at the mountain, they're like, okay, what is the most efficient way to get to the peak of this mountain? And I think this can be really helpful. And again, this is a supportive aspect. The Earth trine between Mars and the moon, right, helps us to have practical and a grounded outlook on what we are engaging in right now. It also gives us some motivation to meet the challenge that life is presenting and the will to fight for the things that we feel are the most important and the things that we really care about, and to engage in the struggle to succeed in what we have set out to do. Just remember to return to the Cancerian emotional needs for caring and connection as we engage in the struggle up the mountain, and really consider the ways in which we can expand our emotional capacity through what we are engaging in and our ability to lean into what truly nurtures us on an emotional level so that we can offer that nourishment to the things that we truly care about. Okay, rounding us out, Saturday, July the 12th. Saturn stations retrograde at 1 degree and 56 minutes of the cardinal fire sign of Aries. So Saturn stations retrograde on the 12th, and then they will retrograde back into Pisces on September the 1st, and then they will move back. They will move all the way back to 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Pisces, where they will station direct on November the 27th of this year. And then they will re-enter Aries on February the 13th, 2026, and they will stay in Aries until April 12th of 2028. And about a week after Saturn re-enters Aries, they will complete their conjunction with Neptune on February the 20th of 2026 at 0 degrees and 45 arc minutes of Aries. So we'll get to that in a moment. So Saturn entered into the cardinal fire sign of Aries on May the 24th. And this is a sign where Saturn is in their fall. Saturn has a hard time doing what it does, which is committing to the things that it wants to make real and that will withstand the test of time in this Mars ruled sign. In Aries, Saturn can feel kind of rushed, which makes it difficult to create functional infrastructure in order to create long-term stability. Saturn is all up in the mix with Neptune, who is dissolving structures, which is making it even more challenging. And so Saturn is kind of scrambling to invent and implement systems that can maintain the status quo, even as Neptune is sort of washing them away and kind of laughing about it. But again, Saturn is feeling really like rushed to handle business. And there's a lot of new energy arising in areas that Saturn is also trying to suppress to keep the old orders in line, right? And to maintain those orders. One of the ways that this can look is a paradigm shift, right? This new kind of like Neptunian washing away old structures, again, Uranus moving into Gemini, right? And creating these like big paradigm shifts, which I think Saturn is really trying to suppress, right? And one of the new paradigms that I've been thinking about is a paradigm of win-win situations, right? And this is a world that is used to and pretty dead set on the existing order of a win-lose model. And Saturn is really trying to uphold that paradigm and is feeling a lot of pressure to prevent new ideas and systems and energy from emerging that might destabilize this existing order of how the Saturnian world functions, win lose, right? And on one level, Saturn retrograde is kind of no big deal, right? Saturn will spend about 4 months moving backwards through the zodiac. However, on another level, this retrograde provides us with the opportunity on both an individual and a collective level to rethink and re-examine the systems and structures that we are implementing in order to create our reality. Right? It is a chance to reevaluate the things that we have chosen to dedicate our time and energy to and the bits that we have chosen to commit to. With this retrograde, we can ask ourselves, is this really working? Right? What might need to shift so that this can work a little bit better? Aries is about new energy arising and emerging and breaking through the surface. It is claiming space and fighting to belong. Right? So, what are the projects that have been initiated or that you have been called to initiate? Where are the places that you might be feeling a little rush to create stability? What are the things that we are motivated to lock down and continue working on and working towards? And how might we need to rethink our approach or our processes around these things? What might need to adjust so that we can have more of what we want? And how can we structure these things so that they can last a long time? So on September the 1st, Saturn will re-enter Pisces, and this is the last pass of the Saturn return for you folks who have your natal Saturn in Pisces. So good luck to you, my friends. It's the final exam where you get the chance to integrate the wisdom and personal development that occurred during Saturn's sojourn through the sign of the fishes. Between September and the end of November, y'all with your Saturns and Pisces may be asked to revisit some of the lessons that you learned, and you might be offered some opportunities to make these same mistakes again, just to make really sure you learned what you needed to learn from the planet of maturity and responsibility. And for the rest of us, we may feel a bit of relief as the intense energy of the Saturn Neptune conjunction begins to dissipate just a little bit. However, Saturn has been working really hard in Aries trying to get things together and maintain order, for better or for worse, right? And as Saturn re-enters Pisces, there may be the feeling of, fuck it, I'm taking a nap, right? The structural needs of the current situation may not feel as pressing, and Saturn may want to go back to sleep in order to dream a different vision of how things could be or should be. And this can be helpful after the intensity of Saturn in their fall. Or it may contain a bit of escapism and a retreat from the pressures of what is being asked of us. As Saturn stations retrograde, they sort of stop in their tracks and they post up at this 1 degree and 56-minute mark of Aries. Neptune, who just stationed retrograde on July 4th, will begin creeping ever so slowly back towards Saturn, which will push their relationship to within a hair's width over the next week or so before Saturn starts their retreat back into Pisces. This is the closest they will come to a conjunction until they perfect that conjunction, excuse me, on February 20th, 2026. So the themes that are developing now will continue to play out until they come into a culmination in February. Right? Saturn conjunctions with Neptune dissolve structures and wash away stability. And we saw like pretty egregious example of this with the House passing the budget bill, which washed away the social safety net of Medicare and SNAP and siphoned billions and billions of dollars away from the most vulnerable Americans, as well as middle class and working class people, and into the pockets of corporations and billionaires. Right? And this is the dissolving infrastructure and systems that can lead to social and structural change, right? Depending on how us, the populace, responds to it. Saturn is the force of order and control, but Neptune can wash away old systems and structures, right? But it doesn't do this on its own. It motivates individuals and communities to action. It can be a wave of energy motivated by belief systems that sweep in and dissolve the old and create new change, right? New systems. And one of the things that we may want to consider for ourselves is how do we create win-win situations in a world that is hell-bent on maintaining a win-lose order. And with that, my friends, I bid you a fond farewell and a great week in space. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm gonna get up out of here and do some other stuff. But I will see you next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel for all the astro weather that you may or may not need to help you through your week. If you're interested in getting a reading, you can DM me or check me out on my website, campwizardcamp.com. And I wish you all a great week in space and happy Uranus into Gemini. Take it easy, my friends. Be kind to yourselves. And until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. And as always, may the force be with you. Bye now.